Well, Canada used to be a nation with family farms dotting our provinces from coast to coast. Not so much anymore, though, as they are increasingly being replaced by mega farms. Question is, what are some of the reasons for this change? Well, joining us today to discuss this further is Dr. Joseph Fournier. He is a rancher, a PhD scientist, and a senior fellow at the Frontier Center for Public Policy. He joins me now. Good to have you with us today, Joseph. Welcome.
Very nice to meet you, Jeanette.
You as well. Okay, Joseph, you wrote an op-ed for the Frontier Center on this very issue, and you believe one of the reasons we're seeing fewer and fewer family farms is because of the tremendous costs associated with starting and or maintaining a farm or ranch.
Yes, you bet. It's a topic dear to my heart and something I've got some firsthand experience at here over the last 8 years as I've reinvented myself as a small scale ranching operation in southern Alberta.
Oh, wonderful. All right. So apparently, what was it, 89% of Canadian lands belong to the Crown, meaning federal or provincial governments control most of the land and they place regulations on farmers of the land, right?
Yeah, that's a quote that I had it in the opening line to this op-ed was, 89% of Canada's landmass is controlled by the Crown. Yeah.
Okay, and some of the biggest regulations come from Canada's supply management system. Can you explain how the management system works, I guess, and how this prevents most young people from ever getting started up on a dairy, poultry, or egg farm, for that matter?
Yes, you bet. The supply chain management process is it's federal, and it's based upon controlled production quotas, and it's specific to dairy. I think most people are familiar with dairy quotas, but also applies to a variety of other, like meat production and egg production. So historically, the idea is that by having production quotas, you can stabilize prices, which was said to be inspired by a desire to protect producers from commodity price fluctuations. So it brought certainty. But today it's become increasingly a barrier to entry for smaller operations.
Okay. Right off the top there, you were mentioning that you yourself are part of this group. What do you farm? What kind of farm do you
So I'm a lamb producer,
Okay.
and so I'm not governed by these production quotas.
Okay.
Cattle production likewise, like beef production for T-bone steaks and hamburger, it too is not governed by supply management quotas. But so like milk, eggs, cheese, yogurt, those are some very common ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to go start just a small scale egg production facility, say 1,000 laying hens, which is a very small operation by today's standards, I would have to pay an upfront purchase of about $800 per chicken to the federal government to buy a quota.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so that'd be like $800,000 just for a right to produce 1,000 eggs a day.
Yeah, that does sound like a tremendous barrier to somebody who wants to start a farm of this type.
Yes, it's a huge upfront cost. So only like for a small scale family operation, like if you want to build $1 million barn, well, you almost got to buy $1 million worth of production quota just for 1,000 chickens. And then you do the math. If it's like 25 cents or 50 cents per egg that you get per chicken, 1,000 chickens is only a few $100s of gross revenue per day. So with the cost of capital right now is very high, as we're all familiar with. Interest rates are no longer what they were the previous 20, 15 years. It's to gain entry to a market, go buy some land and get financing to build a barn. And a major part of that is going to be just getting your production quota for egg production, so.
You mentioned that you are doing land. What types of costs did you find that were associated with starting up a farm?
Well, at the time I was living in the Calgary region, and I already had a home, so I had to save up enough money to meet the minimum requirements. I think at the time it was 20% down. You can't. So I found a property 100 kilometers east of Calgary, and the land is fairly cheap as you go away from the Rocky Mountain foothills. Just bare earth, ag zoning type of land. The price drops significantly, and so it was that we were looking for a home too. So we had to find a parcel of land that had that I could do my ranching on, but also had a pre-existing house on it. So there's a two for one, but that would be the case for a lot of people who are wanting to reinvent themselves, people who aren't multi-generational families, who have been passing down the land for 3 generations. So it was, we were oil and gas. I was an executive. We were dual income, no kids at the time. It was we had some cash flow, but we really had to tap deep to go and buy this meager, just less than a quarter section of land, and then start from scratch is very painful for a new entry
Right.
producer.
And you were somebody who was established. So never mind, somebody who's just starting out in the world, a younger person. And you didn't have to deal with this supply management system that we were talking about that is affecting the
Yes,
poultry and egg farms and dairy farms. So, it looks like we basically end up with fewer independent producers then, which means what? Less competition and fewer family farms and more large operations who have access to major capital, right? And
exactly.
yeah, so you wrote in your op-ed that you write about the example of Hank Van Essen, the owner of Sundial Poultry, that's near Lethbridge here. And it looks like last year, 5 RCMP cruisers showed up to arrest him over a dispute with the egg farmers of Alberta over alleged violations of the 300 hen small flock limit. So, what was that about? Any thoughts also on what needs to change to allow small farmers to be able to actually succeed?
Yeah, well, that is just, I included that well-known reference of the sundial poultry near Lethbridge because it hit the news quite a bit, and it raised the topic up into the average everyday person who particularly lives in the city, in the town. Um, it's what needs to change is um, you have to raise the ceiling, right? So like if you've got people who live outside of the city but they want to have a side business, something simple, like a large hobby farm where you go and build a 5,000 square foot barn and you want to have a couple thousand chickens. That's small. Um, but still, if you live near a small community like, that Lethbridge or in the surrounding communities, a few thousand extra local eggs would be being sold from a single hobby farm would provide a significant expansion in local production, local supply.
Yeah, so raising the ceiling for sure. In the op-ed that you authored, you also mentioned the stats about how much supply management contributes to waste in order to preserve price stability. So can you explain that a little bit?
Basically, the idea is so let's look at dairy milk production. If a farm produces, say, 10 for a few months, they produce 10% more than their production quota allows, they can't even give it away. They have to dispose of it. And the study that I referenced suggested that, like I think it was the Ecological Economics is a peer-reviewed study done here specific to Canadian dairy farmers between 2012 and 2021. And they found that nationally, Canadian dairy farmers were forced to dispose of enough milk that could have fed over 4 million people for an
Oh,
entire year.
oh, that's so sad.
So that's the dark underbelly of supply management.
Wow. Joseph, your article also cites a 2025 brief from Policy Horizons Canada. And it lays out this scenario, a crazy scenario for, maybe not so crazy, but for Canada in 2024, which they're saying that people will have to begin relying on bartering, small-scale food production, hunting, fishing, foraging. Some people might say, oh, this is far-fetched, but is this a possibility? 2040, what is that, 14 years away?
Yeah, that stress test is just a way of looking at policy and the current trajectory of things and extrapolating forward.
If things are to stay the same, or if things don't change.
The affordability will become an increasing crisis, and people are going to be forced to take desperate measures, which is like hunting on public lands. Imagine people actually going into a local game conservation area and hunting for food, or going down to the Bow River or some local river and setting illegal lines to catch fish and without license, and just placing more local pressure on the regional wildlife. That's just it's a stress test, and it was a way of saying, hey, we have a problem here. Supply is the issue. It's too hard for new producers to gain entry legally to the market, and the only ones that can are the large multi-generational families that have been here for generations, and large like corporate farming enterprises that have deep pockets, and so it just crowds out the smaller and producer.
Sounds like there's so many challenges for small farmers, and yet they're such an integral part of our agriculture system. I mean, small family farms are important, and there's a lot of value on them. But unfortunately, Joseph, we're out of time today, but I just appreciate so much your time.
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
Dr. Joseph Fournier is a rancher, scientist, and senior fellow at the Frontier Center for Public Policy. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.